Everyone on Flight 447 saw her as just another kid in Seat 14C, playing games, eating pretzels, needing supervision. But when the plane's systems failed and F-16 fighter jets responded to the emergency, those pilots heard her call sign, Phoenix, and everything changed. She wasn't just any child. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. The morning sun cast long shadows across the departure terminal as passengers shuffled through Gate 23, their rolling luggage clicking rhythmically against the polished floor tiles. Among the business travelers checking their phones and families corralling excited children, a young girl of 12 moved quietly through the jetway, her backpack decorated with colorful patches showing cartoon characters and inspirational quotes. She wore simple jeans and a purple hoodie, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she carried a tablet tucked under one arm along with a small stuffed eagle that had seen better days. To every passenger who glanced her way, she appeared exactly as expected, another unaccompanied minor making a routine flight, probably heading to visit divorced parents or attend summer camp, requiring nothing more than the standard supervision protocols that flight attendants handle dozens of times each week. Her name was Emma Martinez, and she settled into Seat 14C with the practiced efficiency of someone who had flown this route before. The middle seat of row 14 on Transcontinental Airlines Flight 447 from Denver to Washington Dulles offered no particular advantages, sandwiched between a businessman already opening his laptop and an elderly woman knitting something that might become a scarf. Emma tucked her backpack under the seat in front of her, fastened her seatbelt without prompting, and pulled out her tablet, which displayed a half-finished digital puzzle game featuring cartoon dragons. The flight attendant, a pleasant woman named Sharon with 20 years of experience, paused at her row with the practiced smile reserved for young solo travelers. "You doing okay, sweetheart?" Sharon asked, her voice carrying that gentle, slightly louder tone adults often used with children. "Do you need anything before we take off? Some juice maybe?" She held up a small plastic pilot wings badge that the airline distributed to young flyers, a token meant to make the experience memorable for children who might be nervous about traveling alone. Emma looked up and smiled politely, accepting the pin with a quiet thank you. "I'm fine, thank you. I've flown before." Her voice was soft, unremarkable, carrying none of the nervous energy that usually marked first-time young travelers. She was simply present, occupying her assigned space with minimal fuss, exactly the kind of unaccompanied minor that crew members appreciated because she required so little intervention beyond the mandatory check-ins. Sharon made a note on her passenger manifest, confirming that the in 14C was settled and cooperative, then continued down the aisle. The businessman beside Emma never looked up from his spreadsheet, and the elderly woman offered only a brief grandmotherly smile before returning to her knitting needles. To them, Emma represented no mystery, no story worth investigating. She was simply a child in Seat 14C, one of millions of young passengers who flew annually, notable only for her quiet demeanor and the stuffed eagle she kept close. What none of them knew was that the stuffed eagle bore a small embroidered patch on its chest featuring the call sign, Phoenix, and the distinctive insignia of the 18th Fighter Squadron. What the passenger manifest didn't reveal was that Emma Martinez had spent 14 months battling acute lymphoblastic leukemia at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center, where her father had been stationed as a maintenance officer. What the friendly flight attendant couldn't see was the medical port still implanted beneath Emma's collarbone, hidden under her hoodie, a reminder of chemotherapy treatments that had very nearly killed her before finally achieving remission 6 months earlier. During those long months in the pediatric oncology ward, Emma had met dozens of military personnel who visited young patients as part of morale programs, but one visit had changed everything. Colonel Marcus "Viper" Reeves, a legendary F-16 pilot with 300 combat hours and a reputation for bringing damaged birds home against impossible odds, had been making his monthly rounds when he encountered Emma during her darkest week. The 12-year-old girl, bald from chemotherapy and weak from treatments that ravaged her small body, had been drawing pictures of fighter jets with shaking hands, her father's stories of aviation providing the only escape from medical reality. Colonel Reeves had pulled up a chair beside her hospital bed and spent 2 hours talking about flying, about pushing through when instruments failed and situations turned desperate, about the moment when pilots had to decide whether to eject or fight to save the aircraft. He told her about the call sign Phoenix, explaining how it represented rising from destruction, being reborn from ashes, coming back stronger after being broken down to nothing. "You're fighting that fire right now," he had told her, his voice carrying absolute certainty. "You're in the flattest part of the spin, where gravity wants to pull you down and your instruments are telling you there's no recovery possible. But I've seen your eyes, Emma. You've got the look. You're going to pull out of this dive, and when you do, you're going to climb higher than you ever flew before. You're going to be Phoenix." 3 days later, when Emma's white blood cell counts had dropped to near fatal levels and doctors prepared her parents for the worst, Colonel Reeves had returned with his entire squadron. 6 F-16 pilots in flight suits stood in that hospital room and performed an informal call sign ceremony, something that normally happened only in squadron-ready rooms after months of proving yourself in the cockpit. They presented Emma with the stuffed eagle bearing the Phoenix patch, and Colonel Reeves officially declared that she had earned the honorary call sign through demonstrated courage under fire that exceeded anything they faced in combat. From this day forward, Colonel Reeves had announced with parade ground formality, "You are Phoenix 6. You've engaged the enemy, you've taken damage that should have been fatal, and you're still flying. That makes you one of us." Emma had cried then, not from pain or fear but from overwhelming recognition that these warriors saw something in her struggle that transcended her age or civilian status. She kept that stuffed eagle within reach during every subsequent treatment, and when the cancer finally retreated and doctors declared her in remission, she knew the call sign had become part of her identity in ways that transcended military tradition. Now, 6 months later, she was flying to Washington, D.C. for a follow-up appointment at Walter Reed and a special ceremony where she would meet other honorary call sign recipients. Her parents were driving from Colorado and would meet her at the airport, a plan that saved them 2 expensive airline tickets while allowing Emma to demonstrate the independence she had fought so hard to reclaim. The Boeing 737 pushed back from the gate at exactly 8:47 a.m. and Captain Robert Hayes began his taxi toward runway 16 with the comfortable efficiency of a 23-year airline veteran. First Officer Jennifer Cole handled radio communications with Denver Tower, her voice crisp and professional. In the cabin, Sharon and 2 other flight attendants demonstrated safety procedures to passengers who mostly ignored the presentation. Emma watched politely, her hands folded in her lap, her tablet now dark as regulations required. Flight 447 reached the runway threshold, and Captain Hayes received takeoff clearance from Denver Tower. The engines spooled up to full power and the aircraft accelerated down the runway with steady purpose. Emma felt the familiar pressure pushing her back into her seat, watched the painted stripes blur into continuous lines, and experienced the slight floating sensation as the nose wheel lifted and the ground fell away. Denver dropped beneath them as the 737 climbed toward its assigned altitude of 37,000 feet. For the first 43 minutes of flight, absolutely nothing remarkable occurred. The aircraft climbed to cruise altitude, turned eastward, and settled into the gentle vibration that marked normal operations. Sharon made her way down the aisle with beverage service, offering Emma a ginger ale and a small bag of pretzels. The businessman ordered coffee and immediately returned to his laptop. The elderly woman snored softly. Emma finished her puzzle game and switched to an e-book, a fantasy novel that let her imagination drift far from the mundane reality of commercial aviation. At 9:34 a.m. Mountain Time, Captain Robert Hayes suddenly slumped forward in his seat, his left hand releasing the control yoke as his right clutched at his chest. First Officer Cole looked over at the same moment Hayes began making strangled gasping sounds, his face contorting with pain that indicated catastrophic medical emergency. Cole immediately pressed the call button for the flight attendants while reaching across to stabilize the aircraft controls. "Sharon, get up here now. Captain's down." Cole's voice carried controlled urgency rather than panic, but her hands moved with quick efficiency. She keyed the radio for air traffic control. "Denver Center, Transcontinental 447, declaring emergency. Captain incapacitated, possible cardiac event, requesting immediate assistance and priority handling." Sharon sprinted toward the flight deck and burst through the cockpit door to find Captain Hayes unconscious, his breathing shallow and irregular, his skin pale and sweating. First Officer Cole maintained focus on flying the aircraft while simultaneously trying to coordinate help. "I need someone with medical training, now," Sharon shouted back into the cabin. "Medical emergency in the cockpit. Is anyone a doctor or nurse?" A passenger from first class, a cardiologist returning from a conference, rushed forward and squeezed into the cramped cockpit. He checked Hayes quickly, his face grim. "He's having a major heart attack. We need to get him horizontal and start treatment immediately, but there's no room here. We have to move him." The next 15 minutes devolved into controlled chaos as they carefully extracted the unconscious captain from his seat and laid him in the galley area where the doctor could perform CPR and administer emergency medications. Sharon coordinated with 2 other passengers who had nursing backgrounds while First Officer Cole remained alone in the cockpit, suddenly bearing sole responsibility for 147 souls aboard an aircraft flying at 37,000 feet over the Rocky Mountains. Cole was a competent pilot with 8 years of airline experience, but she had never commanded a commercial flight. She could fly the aircraft perfectly well under normal circumstances, but the psychological pressure of being solely responsible transformed routine operations into an overwhelming burden. Her hands trembled slightly as she contacted Denver Center again, requesting medical diversion options. At 9:52 a.m., the situation escalated from serious to catastrophic. First Officer Cole was coordinating the emergency descent when alarms began screaming in the cockpit. The master warning lights illuminated red across the instrument panel as multiple systems simultaneously reported failures. The left engine fire warning activated first, followed immediately by loss of hydraulic pressure in 2 separate systems. "Denver Center, Transcontinental 447, we have multiple system failures. Left engine fire warning, losing hydraulics, requesting immediate emergency assistance." Her voice remained professional but the tension was obvious now. She pulled the fire handle for the left engine, shutting it down and activating suppression systems while the aircraft began vibrating with the asymmetric thrust. The autopilot disconnected with a loud warning chime, forcing her to hand-fly the crippled jet while simultaneously running emergency checklists she had never performed outside simulators. In the cabin, passengers felt the aircraft bank sharply as Cole compensated for the engine failure. Oxygen masks dropped from overhead compartments with a collective gasp of alarm, and people who had been calmly ignoring the medical emergency now understood they faced something far more serious. Sharon's voice came over the PA system, fighting to maintain calm. "This is your lead flight attendant. We are experiencing a serious emergency. Put on your oxygen masks immediately, secure your seatbelts, and prepare for possible emergency landing. Flight attendants, prepare for impact procedures." Emma Martinez had grabbed her oxygen mask automatically when it deployed, pulling it over her face with quick efficiency. But unlike other passengers who were now praying or crying or staring in frozen shock, Emma's mind shifted into a different mode entirely. She had spent 14 months surrounded by military personnel who talked constantly about emergency procedures, about maintaining focus during crisis, about the critical difference between panic and disciplined response. She unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up, ignoring the businessman who grabbed at her arm and shouted that she needed to sit down. She pulled off her oxygen mask and moved toward the front of the cabin where Sharon was preparing for impact. "I can help," Emma said loudly enough to cut through the rising panic. "I know emergency procedures. Let me talk to the pilot." Sharon stared at this 12-year-old girl with complete incomprehension. "Honey, no, you need to sit down and put your mask back on. The pilot is handling the emergency. You can't help. Please go back to your seat." "My call sign is Phoenix 6, Emma said clearly. "I was trained by the 18th Fighter Squadron. I know coordination procedures for military-civilian emergencies. The pilot needs tactical support, and I can help coordinate with fighters if they scramble for this emergency." Before Sharon could respond, the cockpit door opened and First Officer Cole's desperate voice called out. "Sharon! I need anyone who knows anything about aviation up here right now. I can't handle all of this alone. Emma didn't wait for permission. She pushed past Sharon and climbed into the cockpit. First Officer Cole glanced back, saw a child, and her face twisted with frustrated desperation. What? No. Get back to your seat. I need a pilot, not. I'm Phoenix 6, honorary call sign from the 18th Fighter Squadron, Emma interrupted. I know emergency coordination procedures. I've logged simulator hours. I can help with radio coordination and checklist procedures while you fly. Tell me what you need. Cole stared at this girl who was speaking in precise aviation terminology, whose calm demeanor contrasted sharply with Cole's own rising panic. Another alarm began shrieking, and she made the instant decision that any help was better than none. Fine. Get in the jump seat. Strap in. The checklist binder is behind you. I need you to read the dual hydraulic failure procedures while I maintain control. Emma climbed into the observer's jump seat and buckled the 5-point harness. She grabbed the emergency checklist binder and flipped to the correct section. She began reading procedures in clear, calm voice, giving Cole the sequential steps for managing system failures that threatened to make the aircraft uncontrollable. Step 1, verify hydraulic quantity in systems A and B. Step 2, activate alternate extension system for landing gear. Step 3, reference fuel remaining and calculate maximum range with single engine operation. At Denver Air Route Traffic Control Center, the emergency coordinator had been tracking Transcontinental 447 since the initial medical emergency report. When the multiple system failures occurred, he immediately activated military coordination protocols. The tracking data showed a commercial airliner with catastrophic failures limping eastward over Colorado. The command decision was made in 90 seconds. 2 F-16 Fighting Falcons from the 120th Fighter Squadron received scramble orders to intercept and assess the stricken airliner. The pilots, Major Derek Chaos Patterson and Captain Lisa Blade Chen, were airborne in under 4 minutes, their F-16s thundering off the runway and climbing at rates that pushed them back into their ejection seats. The F-16s accelerated to supersonic speed, covering the distance in minutes. Major Patterson established radio contact with Denver Center, receiving vectors toward the stricken 737. They found Flight 447 at 9:58 a.m., the wounded aircraft trailing minor smoke from the shutdown engine. Denver Center, Chaos 11 flight has visual on Transcontinental 447, Patterson reported. Single engine operation visible, aircraft appears stable but showing asymmetric flight characteristics. Requesting clearance to establish tactical escort and open emergency frequency communication with civilian crew. Inside the 737 cockpit, Emma heard the radio transmission and felt something shift in her chest. F-16s. Fighters responding to their emergency, the same aircraft that Colonel Reeves flew. She looked at First Officer Cole and made a decision that exceeded her age and technical authority. Request permission to communicate with the fighter escort, Emma said quietly. I know their protocols. I can coordinate tactical information while you focus on flying. Cole shot her a wild glance. You're 12. You can't talk to military fighters. Another alarm interrupted her. Fine. Whatever. The radio is set to emergency frequency. Say whatever you want. I have to fly. Emma reached for the radio microphone with steady hands. She pressed the transmit button and spoke with clear pronunciation. Chaos 11 flight, this is Transcontinental 447, emergency coordination. I'm Phoenix 6, honorary call sign from the 18th Fighter Squadron. We have captain incapacitation, first officer sole pilot, multiple system failures including left engine and dual hydraulic systems. Aircraft controllability degrading, request tactical escort and emergency guidance for nearest suitable landing facility. In the lead F-16, Major Derek Patterson's hand froze on his throttle. The radio call had come from someone young, but who had just identified herself with a call sign and squadron affiliation. He keyed his radio carefully. Transcontinental 447, Chaos 11 copies your emergency. Can you confirm that call sign? Phoenix 6 from the 18th Squadron. Emma's heart hammered but her voice remained steady. Affirm, Chaos. Honorary call sign awarded by Colonel Marcus Reeves and the 18th Fighter Squadron for courage under fire. I'm 12 years old, cancer survivor, sitting jump seat in civilian cockpit. First officer needs assistance beyond my capability. Requesting fighter coordination for emergency landing procedures. The radio went silent for 3 seconds. Major Patterson pulled up alongside the 737, close enough to see through the cockpit windows, and saw the small figure in the jump seat. Phoenix 6, Chaos 11 acknowledges. His voice had changed, carrying respect now. I know Colonel Reeves. I know the 18th Squadron. I know exactly why you carry that call sign, and I'm honored to provide support. Stand by for tactical coordination. Major Patterson contacted Buckley Operations with information that moved rapidly up the command chain. Within 2 minutes, the coordination reached Peterson Air Force Base and Northern Colorado Regional Airport, where emergency response teams began preparing for an emergency landing that would require perfect coordination between civilian and military assets. Captain Chen pulled her F-16 up to the other side of the stricken 737, her visual assessment confirming fluid leaking from hydraulic systems and visible damage. She photographed the damage with her targeting pod and transmitted images to ground coordinators. Phoenix 6, Blade 1-2 here. Captain Chen's voice carried warmth despite their emergency. I'm going to read you control surface configurations so first officer can anticipate aircraft response during descent. Tell her we're seeing asymmetric flap deployment and rudder authority looks compromised. Landing will require maximum concentration and probably manual control. Emma relayed the information to First Officer Cole, who nodded grimly while fighting increasingly sluggish controls. The F-16 pilots began providing real-time assessment of the aircraft's external condition, information that Cole couldn't see from inside the cockpit. Emma served as translator and coordinator, managing radio communications while Cole focused entirely on keeping the dying aircraft in the sky. At 10:03 a.m., Colonel Marcus Reeves received an emergency phone call at his office in Langley Air Force Base. Sir, you need to hear this. We have tactical coordination ongoing for civilian emergency, and your honorary call sign recipient is in that aircraft, coordinating with F-16 escort. Reeves grabbed the phone and heard the recorded radio transmissions, heard Emma's voice maintaining professional calm. He closed his eyes and felt something powerful wash through his chest. That little girl who had fought cancer with courage that exceeded anything he faced in combat was now proving that the call sign Phoenix represented truth rather than sentiment. Patch me through to the tactical frequency, Reeves ordered. Phoenix 6 is my responsibility, and I'm going to bring her home. 30 seconds later, Emma heard a voice she recognized instantly. Phoenix 6, this is Viper. I'm monitoring your situation and coordinating from Langley. You're doing outstanding work, warrior. Stay focused, maintain that discipline, and we're going to bring everyone home safe. Tears started in Emma's eyes, but she blinked them away. Copy, Viper. Good to hear you. We're managing controllability but degrading fast. First officer is doing amazing work but she's alone up here and exhausted. Colonel Reeves began coordinating additional resources, bringing military aviation expertise to bear on the civilian emergency. He contacted Northern Colorado Regional Airport directly, coordinating emergency foam deployment and positioning crash rescue equipment. He consulted with Boeing engineers about survivability parameters when multiple hydraulic systems failed. The F-16 pilots maintained their escort positions, their presence visible to passengers who now understood that military fighters were somehow involved in their crisis. Emma continued coordinating between First Officer Cole and the fighter escort, providing relay communication that allowed Cole to focus entirely on flying while military expertise surrounded them with support. At 10:17 a.m., Transcontinental Flight 447 began its final approach to Northern Colorado Regional Airport, descending through clouds with asymmetric thrust and compromised control surfaces. First Officer Cole's hands moved constantly on the controls, her face running with sweat, her entire being focused on getting this aircraft to the runway. Emma read approach checklist procedures, maintained radio coordination with tower and fighter escort, and kept her voice steady even as the ground rose toward them. Phoenix 6, Chaos 1-1 here. You're lined up perfectly. Call out any control anomalies and we'll relay to tower. You're doing brilliantly. Major Patterson's voice carried absolute confidence. Blade 1-2 confirms perfect approach angle. Phoenix, tell First Officer she's flying like a combat pilot. This is exceptional handling of catastrophic emergency. Captain Chen added her support. The runway appeared through breaking clouds, emergency vehicles positioned along both sides with lights flashing. First Officer Cole called for full flaps despite knowing that asymmetric deployment might roll the aircraft. The hydraulic systems groaned and protested, but enough control authority remained for Cole to manage the approach. 200 feet, Emma called out. Sync rate stable. Approach speed good. 100 feet. The aircraft crossed the runway threshold at precisely correct altitude and speed. The main wheels touched with a sharp bang, and Cole immediately deployed thrust reversers on the operating right engine while standing on the brakes. The nose gear slammed down hard, and for several seconds the aircraft's trajectory remained uncertain, but the 737 finally rolled to complete stop 4,000 feet down the runway. Emergency vehicles surrounded them immediately, foam spraying across hot surfaces. Inside the cockpit, First Officer Cole collapsed back in her seat, shaking with adrenaline and exhaustion and relief. Emma unbuckled from the jump seat and put her hand on Cole's shoulder. You did it. That was perfect. You saved everyone. Cole looked at this 12-year-old girl who had somehow coordinated a military fighter escort and maintained operational discipline during the worst emergency of her career, and she started crying. Who are you? How did you, what just happened? Before Emma could answer, the cockpit door opened and Sharon appeared, her face stunned and grateful. Behind her, passengers were already standing, hugging, crying with joy at being alive. The businessman from 14B pushed forward and stared at Emma with complete bewilderment. You were just a kid sitting next to me. I thought, we all thought, how did you know how to do any of that? Emma picked up her stuffed eagle from where it had fallen during landing, the Phoenix patch clearly visible, and held it quietly. I'm Phoenix 6. I earned my call sign by fighting different kind of fire. Today I got to use what I learned. Outside the aircraft, as passengers evacuated down emergency slides, the two F-16s made a low pass over the airport in precise formation. Major Patterson and Captain Chen dipped their wings in the traditional salute, a gesture of respect between warriors. Colonel Marcus Reeves arrived that evening, flying commercial from Virginia. He found Emma in a conference room at the airport, wrapped in a blanket and drinking hot chocolate while her parents held her close. When Reeves walked in, Emma looked up and smiled with quiet satisfaction. I pulled up from the spin, Viper. Just like you taught me. Reeves knelt beside her chair and put both hands on her shoulders, his eyes bright with emotion. You did more than that, Phoenix. You demonstrated something that every warrior needs to see. You showed us that courage isn't about age or rank or physical strength. It's about refusing to quit when everything says you should. You saved 147 lives today. You earned that call sign in the hospital, and today you proved it belongs to you. First Officer Jennifer Cole approached tentatively. I need to know how she knew all that. How does a 12-year-old understand emergency coordination procedures? Emma's father Carlos Martinez spoke quietly. During her treatment, she couldn't do anything physical. Couldn't go to school, couldn't play, couldn't even walk most days. But she could listen. The pilots who visited talked to her for hours about aviation, about emergencies, about procedures. She studied flight manuals in the hospital. It was the only thing that kept her mind engaged while her body was being destroyed by treatment. Sharon had tears running down her face. I almost made her sit down. I almost sent her back to 14C because she was just a kid. Emma reached out and took Sharon's hand. You let me help when it mattered. You trusted me when nothing made sense. That took courage too. The story exploded across news media within hours. The child in seat 14C who coordinated military fighter escort, the cancer survivor with an honorary call sign who assisted during catastrophic emergency. Reporters descended on northern Colorado Regional Airport seeking interviews, trying to understand how someone so young could have performed coordination that seemed to require military training. Major Derek Patterson and Captain Lisa Chen traveled to Colorado 3 days after the emergency to meet Emma properly on the ground. They arrived in their flight suits bearing squadron patches, and when they shook Emma's hand with the grip of equals, she felt recognition that transcended age difference. Phoenix 6, it's an honor, Major Patterson said formally. I've flown combat missions in 3 different theaters, and I've never witnessed coordination as precise as what you provided during that emergency. You maintained discipline when trained professionals were losing composure. You saved lives through knowledge and courage, which is exactly what warriors do. Captain Chen added her perspective. Call signs aren't just nicknames. They represent identity, they carry heritage, and they obligate the bearer to live up to the meaning. Phoenix means rising from destruction, refusing to stay down when everything says you should quit. You earned that call sign in the hospital, but you proved it belonged to you at 37,000 feet. That's warrior mindset, and age has nothing to do with it. The Northern Colorado Regional Airport held a formal ceremony 6 weeks after the emergency. First responders received commendations, air traffic controllers were recognized, and First Officer Cole received awards from multiple aviation organizations. But the moment that brought tears came when Colonel Reeves presented Emma with an official flight suit bearing her call sign and squadron patch, sized for her small frame but identical to what active-duty pilots wore. This is not symbolic, Reeves announced to the assembled crowd. This flight suit represents Emma's official status as Phoenix 6 of the 18th Fighter Squadron. She has earned the right to wear this uniform through demonstrated courage that exceeds what we require of our combat pilots. She is permanently part of our heritage, and every pilot who joins our unit will learn her story. Emma stood on that stage wearing her flight suit, the stuffed eagle tucked under her arm, and felt belonging that transcended any civilian recognition. She was part of something larger than herself, connected to a warrior tradition that valued courage and resilience above physical strength or conventional qualifications. The months following brought developments that demonstrated the rippling impact of that single emergency flight. The 18th Fighter Squadron established a formal youth mentorship program, partnering with pediatric hospitals to provide structured aviation education for young patients fighting serious illnesses. Colonel Reeves designed curriculum that taught basic flight principles, emergency procedures, and warrior mindset concepts. Emma became an informal ambassador for the program, visiting hospitals and speaking with young patients who found inspiration in her story. She brought her flight suit and stuffed eagle, shared her experiences honestly, and helped children understand that knowledge gained during suffering could serve purposes beyond immediate survival. When you're in the hospital, everything feels pointless, she told a 9-year-old boy undergoing chemotherapy. The treatments hurt, you can't do normal things, and you wonder why you should keep fighting. But you're learning things right now that other kids don't learn. You're discovering how strong you really are. Cancer isn't wasted suffering. It's warrior training for battles we haven't faced yet. A year after the emergency, Emma attended her first official squadron reunion, traveling to Nevada with her parents for the 18th Fighter Squadron's annual gathering. She met dozens of pilots who treated her with the casual camaraderie that squadron members showed each other. They told flying stories, shared combat experiences, and included Emma in conversations with the assumption that she belonged. The evening of the reunion, Colonel Reeves assembled the squadron for a formal ceremony. Emma stood before 60 fighter pilots in their flight suits. Reeves presented her with a plaque that would hang permanently in the Squadron Heritage Room, bronze metalwork showing a phoenix rising from flames with the inscription, Phoenix 6, Emma Martinez, Courage Under Fire, Inspires Warriors. This young warrior demonstrated something that every pilot needs to remember, Reeves told his squadron. Technical skill matters, but courage matters more. Knowledge is valuable, but the will to apply that knowledge during crisis is what saves lives. Phoenix 6 earned her call sign through a battle that most of us will never face. She proved that call sign belonged to her by functioning under pressure that would break many trained professionals. She's 12 years old, she's a cancer survivor, and she's tougher than most people will ever meet. We're honored to call her one of ours. The squadron erupted in applause, and Emma felt tears on her cheeks that had nothing to do with sadness. She belonged to this family of warriors, connected by shared understanding that courage transcended age, gender, rank, or the specific battles each person fought. Emma Martinez returned home to Colorado carrying that plaque and wearing her squadron patch, forever changed by events that began when she simply wanted to travel from Denver to Washington for a medical appointment. The girl who had been just a kid in Seat 14C had become Phoenix 6, a warrior whose name would inspire future generations of pilots and patients, a symbol of courage that proved age meant nothing when situations demanded more than any individual should be able to provide. She would grow up carrying that call sign, eventually pursuing aviation as a career, earning her pilot's license at 17 and joining the Air Force Academy at 18. But those achievements lay years in the future. For now, she was 12 years old, alive, healthy, and permanently part of a warrior tradition that valued her courage above every conventional measure. The stuffed eagle sat on her dresser, the phoenix patch visible to everyone who entered her room, a constant reminder that she had earned the right to rise from ashes and soar. And whenever young patients asked Colonel Reeves about call signs during hospital visits, he told them Emma's story with absolute conviction. Remember Phoenix 6, he told children fighting their own battles. She was just a kid in a hospital bed, facing treatments that nearly killed her. But she learned, she prepared, and when the moment came, she saved 147 lives because she refused to quit learning even when everything hurt. You're fighting your own fire right now. Keep fighting. Keep learning. Be ready for the moment when your courage will matter. Because you're warriors too, and warriors never quit climbing back into the sky. The Federal Aviation Administration launched a comprehensive investigation into the multiple system failures aboard Flight 447, eventually determining that a catastrophically unlikely combination of manufacturing defects, maintenance oversights, and in-flight stress factors had created cascade failures that should have been mathematically impossible. The investigation led to significant changes in maintenance protocols and quality control procedures across the airline industry, preventing future occurrences of the specific failure pattern that nearly brought down the aircraft. Boeing engineers spent months analyzing the data, creating new redundancy systems and inspection requirements that would save countless lives in years to come. But investigators also spent considerable time analyzing the human factors that enabled survival despite the technical failures. The presence of a child with aviation knowledge, the rapid military response, the coordination between civilian and fighter pilots, and the exceptional flying by First Officer Cole all contributed to an outcome that exceeded what computer models predicted as possible. The investigation report included a detailed section specifically highlighting Emma's contribution as an example of how unconventional assets could provide critical support during crisis situations. The report was studied in aviation schools worldwide, becoming required reading for commercial pilots and air traffic controllers who needed to understand that help could come from unexpected sources during emergencies. Captain Robert Hayes, recovered sufficiently from his heart attack to attend the one-year anniversary ceremony though still weak and facing permanent medical grounding, spoke publicly about the guilt he carried for triggering the entire crisis through his medical emergency. His voice broke with emotion as he addressed the assembled crowd of survivors, crew members, and military personnel who had gathered to commemorate the successful emergency response. "I've flown for 23 years without incident," Hayes said quietly, his hands gripping the podium for support. "I took pride in my perfect safety record, my technical proficiency, my ability to handle any situation. Then my body betrayed me at the worst possible moment, when 147 people depended on me to keep them safe. I should have died in that cockpit. Jennifer should have died trying to fly alone. Every passenger should have died because I failed them. He paused, wiping tears from his weathered face. But a 12-year-old girl refused to accept that outcome. She stood up when trained adults were paralyzed by fear. She coordinated resources that I didn't even know existed. She gave Jennifer the support structure that made survival possible. Emma Martinez saved my life along with everyone else's, and I will spend the rest of my days trying to live up to the courage she demonstrated. Emma approached Captain Hayes after his speech and hugged him with the fierce compassion of someone who understood what it meant to feel like your body had betrayed you at the worst possible moment. You couldn't help what happened to your heart, just like I couldn't help what happened with cancer, she told him softly. But we both kept fighting when things went wrong. That's what matters. You survived the heart attack, and that took its own kind of courage. Don't carry guilt for something you couldn't control. The airline industry responded to Emma's story with unexpected humility, recognizing that their standard protocols for unaccompanied minors had nearly prevented her from assisting during the emergency. Transcontinental Airlines established a new program called the Phoenix Initiative, designed to identify young passengers with specialized knowledge or training who could potentially assist during emergencies. The program remained controversial among child safety advocates who worried about placing responsibility on minors, but it created pathways for proper documentation of capabilities that might prove critical during crisis situations. First Officer Jennifer Cole's relationship with Emma evolved into a profound mentorship that transcended their dramatic introduction. Cole visited Emma in Colorado regularly, and they spent long afternoons at local flight schools where Cole arranged for Emma to practice radio procedures, study advanced navigation techniques, and sit in actual aircraft cockpits under the guidance of patient instructors. Cole shared her own struggles with post-traumatic stress following the emergency, the nightmares that still woke her at 3 a.m. with phantom alarms screaming in her mind, the anxiety that gripped her during normal flights when minor anomalies triggered memories of that desperate day over Colorado. You saved my life as much as I saved yours, Cole told Emma honestly during one of their flight school sessions. I was drowning in that emergency. I had the flying skills but not the emotional capacity to manage everything simultaneously. Your presence gave me structure, your coordination reduced my workload to manageable levels, and your calm voice kept me from spiraling into panic that would have killed us all. Good crews function because everyone contributes their strengths, and you provided exactly what I needed when I needed it most. That's the mark of an exceptional aviator, regardless of age or rank. Major Derek Patterson and Captain Lisa Chen maintained contact with Emma as well, sending her squadron newsletters, inviting her to air shows where they performed demonstration flights, and including her in informal gatherings where fighter pilots shared stories and maintained the warrior bonds that defined their community. They introduced Emma to other honorary call sign recipients, young people who had inspired military personnel through their own battles against impossible circumstances. Emma met a 15-year-old boy who had earned the call sign, Hammer, after surviving a terrorist attack that killed his family, maintaining composure that allowed rescue personnel to save dozens of other victims. She met a 10-year-old girl called Torch, who had pulled 3 younger siblings from a house fire despite suffering severe burns herself. Each story reinforced the truth that courage manifested in countless forms, that warriors existed far beyond military bases and combat zones, and that age meant nothing when situations demanded more than any individual should be able to provide. The media attention gradually faded as new stories captured public attention, but Emma's impact continued rippling outward in ways that exceeded her ability to track or measure. Teachers incorporated her story into curriculum about courage and resilience. Youth programs used her example to demonstrate that learning possessed value beyond immediate application. Cancer support groups shared her experience with newly diagnosed children who needed hope that survival meant more than merely not dying. The stuffed eagle with its phoenix patch appeared in countless hospital rooms, carried by young patients who drew strength from knowing that someone their age had faced similar darkness and emerged into light. Emma returned to school and gradually reclaimed the normal rhythms of childhood that cancer had stolen. She played soccer despite lingering fatigue from treatments, joined the robotics club where her technical knowledge found new applications, and made friends who knew her story but treated her as simply Emma rather than Phoenix 6, the media sensation. She struggled with math homework, argued with her parents about screen time limits, and experienced the ordinary frustrations and joys of being 12 years old in suburban Colorado. But the flight suit hanging in her closet and the call sign patch on her backpack served as constant reminders that she belonged to something larger than normal childhood experience. On the second anniversary of the emergency, Emma stood before a packed auditorium at the Air Force Academy, invited to speak to freshman cadets about courage and leadership. She wore her flight suit with its Phoenix 6 patch, carried her stuffed eagle, and faced 300 future officers who would lead airmen into situations where courage determined survival. Her voice remained soft, her manner unassuming, but every cadet listened with absolute attention as she shared the lessons learned through cancer and crisis. People think courage means not being afraid, Emma told them, her young voice carrying unexpected authority. But that's not what Colonel Reeves taught me. Real courage is being terrified and functioning anyway. It's maintaining discipline when your body is screaming at you to quit. It's choosing to stand up and help when sitting down would be easier and safer. I was scared during cancer treatment. I was scared in that airplane. But I had learned from warriors who face fear every day and keep performing their duties. They taught me that courage doesn't mean not being afraid. It means being afraid and doing what needs to be done anyway. She paused, looking out at young faces that would soon face their own tests in training and eventual deployment. You're going to face situations where everything tells you to quit. Where your instruments say recovery is impossible. Where the smart move seems to be ejecting and letting the aircraft fall. But sometimes you can pull up. Sometimes you can restart the engines and climb back into the sky. That's what Phoenix means. Rising from ashes, being reborn from destruction, choosing to fight one more time even when logic says you're already defeated. That's the mindset you need to protect the people who depend on you. The cadets gave her a standing ovation that lasted 3 minutes, and afterward dozens of them approached seeking advice, sharing their own stories, asking how she maintained focus when circumstances overwhelmed normal capacity. Emma answered their questions with the patience of someone who understood that leadership meant serving others rather than claiming glory, and she left the academy knowing that her story would influence future officers who would face their own impossible situations in years to come. Emma Martinez continued growing up carrying the call sign Phoenix 6, the warrior identity that had been forged in hospital beds and proven in crisis at 37,000 feet. She studied aviation with intensity that surprised even her supportive parents, earning her private pilot's license at 17 and her instrument rating 6 months later. She applied to the Air Force Academy and was accepted immediately, her application supported by recommendations from Colonel Reeves, Major Patterson, Captain Chen, and First Officer Cole that described her demonstrated capability under pressure. She entered the academy at 18, one of the youngest cadets in her class, carrying a reputation that preceded her but also carrying the knowledge that she had already faced tests that most officers would never encounter. The 18th Fighter Squadron maintained her name on their heritage wall, and every new pilot who joined the unit learned the story of Phoenix 6 during their indoctrination. They learned about the girl who fought cancer with courage that exceeded combat operations, who coordinated emergency response from a civilian cockpit when trained professionals were overwhelmed, who proved that warrior mindset transcended age and circumstances. Her story became part of squadron tradition, invoked during difficult moments when pilots needed reminding that courage meant continuing when quitting seemed rational. Years later, when Emma finally earned her wings and joined an operational fighter squadron, she still carried that same stuffed eagle with its Phoenix patch, worn and faded from years of companionship through treatments and training in triumph. She placed it carefully in her locker at her first duty station, and when younger pilots asked about the shabby toy that seemed out of place among flight gear and technical manuals, she told them the story of a 12-year-old girl in seat 14C who learned that knowledge gained through suffering could save lives when crisis demanded more than anyone should be able to provide. Phoenix means rising from fire, she would tell them, her voice carrying the same quiet authority that had coordinated F-16 escort during catastrophic emergency years earlier. It means being broken down to nothing and choosing to rebuild stronger. It means refusing to stay down when everything says you're defeated. I earned that call sign in a hospital bed, proved it in a crippled airliner, and I carry it now as a reminder that courage comes from choosing to fight one more time even when logic says to quit. That's what warriors do. We face the fire, we survive the crash, and we climb back into the sky because people depend on us to keep flying.